Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video we're going to go through and rate every single midfielder that has played for Bradford City under Graham Alexander. If you do go on to enjoy today's video, please make sure to drop a like on there for me and subscribe to the channel as well. If you are new, can we try and hit 200 likes on today's video? And don't forget to get your thoughts in down in the comment section down below. Let me know down below whether you agree or disagree with my ranking. We've got 21 different players to go through in today's video, so let's waste no further time and get straight into it. Now, we did this the other day for defenders and goalkeepers. In today's video we've got every defensive midfielder, box-to-box midfielder, attacking midfielder, and also some really attacking minded wing backs, just so there's an even number-ish throughout all the different categories that we did go on to speak about. Obviously, again, we've got the same 5 categories: S at the top, D at the bottom, and we'll start out firstly then with all of the attacking minded wing backs, because they could have potentially featured in the defenders and goalkeepers video, but there's obviously a lot more defenders and goalkeepers than there is midfielders, so attacking minded wing backs who could also play as a winger. You know what I'm trying to say here. Start out firstly then with Josh Nerthville. I think I'm definitely going to put him in the A category. Did very well for Bradford City last season in League One. I think 3 goals and 7 assists across the full campaign. Consistency at times can be a little bit of a downside to Josh Nerthville, but we knew what we were going to get with him. Maybe needs a little bit more competition going into the upcoming season to really kick him on, and we do need to see a little bit more consistency from Nerthville, but when he's on it, like what he was in the first couple of months of last season, he is absolutely fantastic, a joy to watch. He's absolutely rapid as well, can have that end product as well, delivering balls into the box and getting assists, creating chances, all that sort of stuff. Josh Nerthville for me, definitely in that A category. Sticking with right wing back Harrison Ashby, I'm probably going to put in the C category. He was okay for us, nothing really to stand out, didn't play loads of games, just 2 or 3 starts maybe in his time at Bradford City. Obviously has since moved on to Luton Town. Defensively though, was pretty poor, got caught out on a number of occasions, in particular that last minute goal, that 10-man bounce he scored against Bradford City back in April. Defensively it's still got a lot to work on, but he was okay at best, really, if we're honest. And then the final attack-minded wing-back is Tyreek Wright, who I think I'm going to stick again in the A category. Now, obviously, he's had 2 separate spells under Graham Alexander. He spent the second half of the 23-24 campaign on loan, playing left wing-back for the first time under Alexander. Obviously, his second spell at the club, and I thought Tyreek Wright was pretty poor in that season, if I am completely honest with you. I was disappointed then when we signed him on a permanent deal in the summer. Then in that season where Bradford City got promoted, again, wasn't really a big fan of Tyreek Wright, but last season, our first season back in League One, he was just a completely different player. He was absolutely fantastic last season, and I don't really know where it came from, because I always like to try and be completely honest with my opinion. Because I'd criticised him in the past, I'm not just always going to criticise him because that was my opinion. Obviously it can change, and last season he massively turned it around for me, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of City fans probably felt the same around Tyreek Wright, but really impressed with him last season, contributing to goals and assists, which has been a little bit of a criticism of him in the past. Defensively has come on at leaps and bounds. You'd think we'd taken a step down rather than a step up, but I think he's been so much better in League One than what he was in the year and a half in League Two under Alexander. But last season he was absolutely incredible. The seasons prior to that he was pretty poor, so I think that balances out as probably as an A. Let's move on then to the more central minded midfielders, whether defensive, box to box or attacking. We've got a range of different players on here, from Clark Adore and Louis Sibley to Anthony Sarcevic and Max Power. We'll start out firstly though with Alex Gilead, who I think I'm going to put in that B category. Now, you can never question Gilead's work rate, always gave it 110%, and he's always well liked and respected amongst the Bradford City fans because of that, because when Gilead was playing consistently for Bradford City, to be fair, Alexander didn't have loads of time with Gilead. It was only about 8 months or so in the second half of that 23-24 campaign, and then we terminated his contract in the summer before Bradford City did get promoted, and obviously he's been at Shrewsbury and Carlisle since, hasn't really kicked on in his career. But I always liked Gilead because he worked really hard, but in terms of quality on the pitch, certainly in terms of goals and assists, they were definitely lacking in Amber and Claret. But I'm happy to put Gilead in the B category. Obviously, somebody like a Henry Cartwright is a new signing for Bradford City, and as always with the new signings that have come in this summer, I've only seen them play a couple of pre-season matches against lower league sides, so for that reason all of the new signings will be going in the B category. Next we'll go to Alex Patterson, who I'm happy to put in the A section. It does seem like quite a high standard to get up in that S tier. Obviously, injuries are a little bit of a problem with Patterson, but when he played, I was always a massive fan of him. His ability to strike the ball or pick the ball from inside his own half and dribble past 4 or 5 players and stick it in the back of the net. I really liked Patterson, and I was disappointed with how his time at Bradford City ended. Didn't really get much game time in the December sort of period, was eventually sold to Walsall in the January, but I was a big fan of Patterson. I thought he contributed quite a lot, worked really hard, but again, injuries were the only real reason that's preventing me from putting him up in that S tier. From a really strong positive player to maybe not so much from the other point of view, Emmanuel Osidibe probably going to stick in that D category. Now, in terms of a character, he seemed like a great person to have around the dressing room and all that sort of stuff. Seemed like a really positive, funny person, but unfortunately, in terms of footballing ability, just was nowhere near the standard, really. And I don't think Alexander had him for very long. If I'm completely honest, it might have only literally been a couple of months. That's literally all I can remember. It genuinely might have only been a couple of months. Obviously, he suffered the horrible double leg break in the season prior to that, but Osidibe was just not a very good footballer, unfortunately. Great guy, but not a very good footballer. Anthony Sarsfield, though, without a doubt for me, straight up into that S category. We knew what we got, or were getting, when we signed Anthony Sarsfield, and he's been everything and probably a little bit better. We knew about his quality in League Two. Obviously, had a 3 or 4 month knee injury in that season where we got promoted and did miss the majority of the first half of the campaign, but then when he's come back and whenever he's available, he's an absolute joy to watch. Even last season, pushing 15 goal contributions, I think, in League One, when everyone's always gone on about he cannot do it in England's third tier. An absolute joy to watch, and next season we might see him playing a bit more of a deeper role as that number 8, but for me, without a doubt, one of the best players that I've seen play at Bradford City, certainly in the last decade or so. I think he's absolutely fantastic, and for me, definitely deserves to be in that top category. That goes to show the standards that we are talking about. Sars comfortably, probably an argument to say he's the best midfielder we've had in this period. Kevin McDonald obviously didn't play loads under Alexander, only had about 7 months or so. Prior to that, had been manager of Bradford City for a little bit. I think he's still now kicking about. Was playing obviously in League One last season with Exeter, but I'm going to put McDonald in the B category. He wasn't really an Alexander type of player, very technical, but did lack the fitness and all that sort of stuff, and we all know Alexander's teams are largely built on fitness and needing that. So for me, McDonald, he was steady away. Nothing really too stand out. I'm not sure if he ever scored for Bradford City. He might have had 1 goal potentially, which took a heavy deflection. I don't know, I could be completely making that up. But McDonald was okay, and I'll stick him in that middle category. Again, Callum Connolly is a new signing, so he also does go in that B category as well, alongside Henry Cartwright. Next, we'll go to Lee Evans, who I think I'm going to put in the C category. Obviously, came in the January just gone by to be a backup to Max Power and kind of play those 2 games when we knew Power was going to get suspended. And that's all that he did really. And I think another start as well away at Wickham where he was subbed off at half time, and then in the final few weeks of the season couldn't even find himself in the matchday squad. He wasn't really up to the standards that we were looking for, but that's kind of new. We kind of knew that's what we were getting when we signed Lee Evans, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. Next, we'll go to Richie Smallwood. Now, there's a lot to say here about Smallwood, because obviously, under Mike Hughes, I think he certainly didn't get the best out of him, but under Alexander, Smallwood was fantastic. He was absolutely brilliant. He isolated him as that defensive-minded midfielder, and he absolutely got the best out of him, especially in that season where Bradford City got promoted. He swept up in our end-of-season awards and thoroughly did deserve that. And obviously, if we're talking about Smallwood's full Bradford City career, I think there's an argument to stick him in the A category. But if we're talking about specifically under Alexander, and in particular what he did in that season where Bradford City got promoted, for me personally, he's up in that S category. I thought Alexander knew exactly how to get the best out of Richie Smallwood, and we saw that. Obviously, his red card away at Swindon does tint things a little bit, and for that reason alone, I'd probably say that Sars does rank above Smallwood. But if we're talking specifically about Smallwood's time under Graham Alexander, I thought Alexander certainly got the best out of him. His ability to win the ball back, he was obviously a penalty taker as well for quite a while as well. I think, like I've said a couple of times now, under Alexander, Smallwood for me is going in that top category. You can argue amongst yourselves. George Lapsley is probably another one that belongs in that B category. He's very similar to Alex Gilead. He works very hard, very committed and all that sort of stuff, but at times does lack a little bit of ability, and also hasn't really played loads under Alexander. He came in the January where we got promoted, and obviously scored a couple of important goals at home to Colchester and Cheltenham, but apart from that, hasn't really contributed loads in a Bradford City shirt. Comes on off the bench every now and again to help you try and see a game out, plays the EFL Trophy matches, seems like a fantastic character, again like a fair few of these, pretty much all of them on this list, but in terms of ability it does let him down a little bit at times. Next we'll go to Louis Sibley, who I think again I'm going to stick in that C category. Pretty similar to Lee Evans, we knew when we signed him that he wasn't a particularly great player, and that's kind of what he showed in Claret and Amber. Played the odd game really for Bradford City, a couple out of position as a left wing back, and that didn't really suit him. Played a few times as an attacking midfielder and was very anonymous in that position, but he didn't play enough, I wouldn't say, to stick in that D category, but for me did really flatter to deceive and was quite anonymous in a lot of those games. Next we'll go to Tommy Lee, who obviously had a very contrasting career at Bradford City. Those first 6 months that he signed to play in the second half of the promotion season, he was poor, if not terrible, if we are honest. But then again, when you factor in that he was playing as a striker or an attacking midfielder, that wasn't Tommy Lee's best position, so you can understand why he wasn't playing particularly well. Then at the beginning of our season back in League One, when he was playing his natural position as a box-to-box midfielder, scored a fantastic goal away at Cardiff City. He was very good for the first few months of the season, but then he had that incident at home to Blackpool, I think, with Alexander, and there was a bit of confrontation on the pitch potentially. After that, Jensen Metcalf and Alex Patterson worked their way into the side, and Tommy Lee found minutes really hard to come by. Went out on loan to Bristol Rovers in the January, did quite well there, and has now gone back there for this season as well. But Tommy Lee, for me, I think when you factor everything in, I'd probably stick him in the B category, because he had such a poor start, then he had some really good months in the division above, and then hasn't really played much football since, so I think that does average out in the B category. Next we'll go to Clark Adore, who I think belongs in the C category as well. I was always a big believer in Adore, and I always felt like he had so much ability, but he just never showed it at Bradford City. And I think there was obviously a time where Alexander was picking Clark Adore consistently over Bobby Poynton in around February 2024, and Adore in that month of February, it was fantastic. I think he scored at home to MK Dons there as well, and obviously he'd originally signed a 3-year deal with Bradford City, but spent last season out on loan at Grimsby, and I think as of right now he's still a free agent. There was always loads of ability and so much talent in Clark Adore, but he just never quite showed it on a consistent enough basis, and for that reason alone I'm going to put it in the C category. There was a few times as well where you could maybe question his work rate and work ethic and all that sort of stuff. Obviously Adam Phillips is a new signing, so again he goes in the middle category alongside Callum Connolly and also Henry Cartwright, and that then leaves us with 4, and to be fair, this is not a bad 4 to have at all, is it? Max Power is obviously somebody who massively split the fan base last season, has since moved on to Wigan Athletic, and some people would argue they maybe slightly tarnished his time at Bradford City by his statement saying, you know, he didn't really want to travel on the motorway because he'd set back up life in Wigan when he come back over from Denmark and Saudi Arabia. But for me with Power, I'm going to stick him in the A category. To be able to captain and be, I think, the most consistent performer in terms of minutes played and games started in League One for Bradford City, I think that deserves a lot of credit. And while at times Power did frustrate me a little bit with his set pieces or sometimes losing some easy duels in the midfield, and that's not really what you want from your captain, he obviously contributed to a fair few assists and again set those standards that allowed Bradford City to push on and really compete at the top end of League One last campaign. And for that reason alone, I'm going to stick him in the A category. I think he had a fair few flaws, and that's why I'm not going to stick him in the S tier, but under Alexander I do think he did a pretty decent job at League One level last season. Next we'll go to Bobby Poynton, who for me personally is going in that S category alongside Anthony Sarcevic and also Richie Smallwood. How important were those three, and also Alex Patterson, in the season where Bradford City did get promoted? But we've in years gone by had players that have graduated through the academy, and you want them to do really well because they've come through your academy, like Rhys Staunton, Finkers and Dawson, Keane Scales, Danny Devine prior to that, but none of them ever really looked comfortable and up to the standard. But look at what Bobby Poynton has done, broke into the first team, and obviously with him being one of our own, all the Bradford City fans wanted him to do really well, and then he got his chance in the season where Bradford City got promoted, and he took his chance and he scored goals, he created chances, he got assists. Then we obviously got promoted and we got obviously moved up into League One, and you bring in somebody like a Stephen Humphreys to potentially displace Poynton, and you see inside 10 minutes of his first game in League One, he's already on the score sheet. Could argue he got a hat-trick against rivals Huddersfield Town. Definitely got a brace in that game, and I just think he's got better and better as each year does get by, and I think the sky's the limit for Poynton. Absolutely fantastic footballer. I think he's going to smash it again next season in League One, and having, again, more quality around him, I think Poynton is certainly somebody that we need to be building the team around. He's out of a contract in 12 months' time, so hopefully, you know, he's agreed a new 3-4 year contract at the football club, because that is a little bit concerning. You'd assume there's an option in there for a further season, but a new deal just to secure your highest value player would be pretty nice to have there. But Poynton, for me, incredible footballer and thoroughly deserves to be in the S category. Next we'll go to Jamie Walker, who I think deserves to be in the A category. It's a little bit weird with Jamie Walker, because when he was on it and when he was on his day, he was a fantastic top-end League 2 footballer for Bradford City, but there was a fair few times where obviously he had injuries, not really too much under Alexander, maybe more so under Mike Hughes and Derek Adams, but injuries were certainly a factor with Jamie Walker, and also consistency at times as well. And I do think that in that second half of the season where Bradford City did get promoted, there was a fair few times where he was coming on for the final few minutes and playing as a striker, and you maybe not necessarily playing him in his best role, but Jamie Walker had some real big moments in a Bradford City shirt. Under Alexander, maybe didn't quite show it on a consistent enough basis, so that's probably why he's at the bottom end of A, but I think he's certainly a lot better than a fair few of the players that are in the B category, and you could certainly argue that he works as hard as what Gilead and George Lapsley did, in my personal opinion. But I think Jamie Walker, you could tell that he got what it meant as well to be a Bradford City player, and certainly contributed his fair share in our promotion into League One. So Walker, I'm going to stick him in the A category. And then finally we have Jensen Metcalfe, and I think when you think peak Jensen Metcalfe, prime Jensen Metcalfe, February 2026, I think for that reason alone he has to go in the S category. He's made Bradford City a lot of money this summer, and maybe he's not quite at the same level as Sarswick and Poynton just because of longevity. He was only with Bradford City for a season, and obviously has now moved on to Championship side Millwall. But near enough every time that Metcalfe put on the claret and amber shirt, I thought you could tell that he was committed. He scored a couple absolutely incredible goals at home to Cardiff and Port Vale, and maybe more goal contributions were needed for him to really be competing with your Poyntons and your Sarswicks, your Smallwoods, for example. But you can see what a top young player that he is, as I'd known from his time at Chesterfield. And I think he's going to smash it again next season at Millwall, and he's going to kick on and eventually be a Premier League player, maybe even a future England international, in my opinion. But fantastic footballer, and for that reason alone, I'm sticking him in the S category alongside Poynton, Sarswick and Smallwood. So under Alexander, we haven't really had too many midfielders that have failed for us. We've certainly had a lot more positives than negatives, and that's obviously proven with how successful we have been under Alexander. And I do think midfield is arguably the most important position that Bradford City have in an Alexander system, because they have to be so incredibly fit and have so much quality on the ball, and that is, I think, what you can see here. And those players who didn't quite show it on a consistent enough basis, that is the reason why they are a little bit lower down. And obviously somebody has to be in the D category, and I think we can all say, it's fair to say, out of every player on that list, unfortunately, Osadibe probably was the worst. But let me know down below, do you agree or disagree with my tier list? Don't forget to drop a like on there for me, and subscribe to the channel as well if you are new. Thank you all very much for watching today's video. 200 likes would be massively appreciated. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon for another one.